Hey, Uncle Mark.
Hello.
If I had a shovel,
Yes.
and
a hammer.
and a desire to venture into the world of the supernatural, you know what?
Yes.
You know what I might do? I might go to the graveyard of the gods.
Of the gods. And I'll meet you there.
Okay.
And you're gonna need some hip waders today as well. Because
okay.
This is a watery grave.
We're going sub aqua.
This is a watery grave, and I am really, really happy about today's who we're going to dig up today.
Oh, I'm excited.
This is a person who was forgotten to history for a god who was forgotten to history for a very long time.
Okay.
That has kind of become very, very important again.
Oh, how exciting!
So today we're going to talk about quite an old god, one of the oldest we know of, by the name of Utnapishtim.
You didn't really do that, did you?
I did. Are you familiar with that name at all?
Utnapishtim?
Utnapishtim.
No, I have no idea.
Well, you're going to find out that you're a little bit more familiar than you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So this is an exciting one. So we first meet our hero Utnapishtim in what is considered the oldest intact long-form story thus far found anywhere in the world.
Oh,
The Epic of Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh, yeah.
A great, fantastic story. So, and for those of you who have yet to take your prerequisites for any bachelor's degree, The Epic of Gilgamesh is a long-form poem from the third Sumerian dynasty.
It doesn't rhyme very well.
From the great rivers, great river region of what is now Iraq.
Yeah.
So the oldest evidence...
Mesopotamia.
The middle.
The middle of the river.
Of the Potamia.
Yeah.
Which is famous for Potamias.
Yeah. Hippopotamias.
The oldest evidence of the story was a series of clay tablets that were made in about 2100 BCE.
That's many years. That's too many years ago.
That is a long time ago.
That's all the way on the other side of the Common Era.
You're right. It's there. It's on the other side of that particular arbitrary fence. So, and as we know, tradition in almost any place, but certainly in Near Eastern mythology, the story itself likely predates its written form,
right,
by many hundreds of years at least.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say that the Epic of Gilgamesh and all of its heroes and gods are approaching 5,000 years old from where we sit on the timeline.
Sure, but we would not know which parts of what came from what era, because these stories do, it picked up stuff from places and it dropped off some stuff, and
Right. So we may never know, the actual origin or location of each of these stories, but as large kingdoms like the Sumerians, who then became the Babylonians, did, they just kind of and as the Romans did and the Egyptians did, you just kind of gather it all together and make a big gumbo.
You take the ingredients that make the best soup and you go with it.
That gives you the best explanation for the origin of things and the best way to control the rabble.
Right.
So we meet our friend Utnapishtim for the first time in the story when our hero Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, which is in modern Iraq, is alone and casting about the land, mourning the loss of his once enemy turned friend, Enkidu.
Have you? Okay, first of all, I love the idea of casting about the land. I do it myself on occasion. Cast, every now and then you got to go casting about.
Just cast about.
And
aimlessly.
And also, I'm very pleased about this Enkidu fellow.
You remember Enkidu? Enkidu was...
I don't, but you
really?
Can remind me.
So Enkidu was a wild man that the gods created, like a man of the wilderness, that the gods created to challenge Gilgamesh and to keep him from oppressing the people of Uruk because he was an unjust leader.
He's Loki.
So they fought a mighty fight, and then they became friends afterwards, and then they went on adventures.
Sure.
They killed the bull of heaven. It was a whole thing. And then Enkidu gets killed for that, and so Gilgamesh is super sad. Because it was like his best friend ever.
Yeah.
So anyway, sad Gilgamesh decides to go on a search for his ancestor and god, and Gilgamesh is part god. He's a demigod. Utnapishtim the Faraway. So Utnapishtim the Faraway lives at the mouths of rivers and has the secret to eternal life, which the mourning Gilgamesh is suddenly very interested in for obvious reasons. So Gilgamesh finds Utnapishtim and his wife living at the fabled mouths of rivers. They converse, and Utnapishtim shares his story.
Wait, are these the mouths of several rivers, or is this a place called the mouths of rivers?
It's like a legendary place where all the mouths of rivers are.
All of the rivers share a single mouth?
Apparently.
Okay.
Well, multiple mouths, they just are proximate somehow.
Okay. Well,
it's an old fucking story.
That's fancy.
Yeah. It's written.
Apparently, nobody had time to actually walk all the way to the end of the river.
It's wrote out in clay. It's an old story. So, Gilgamesh finds Utnapishtim and his wife living at the fabled mouths of rivers. They converse. Utnapishtim shares his story. He was not always a god. He became one through a heroic act of courage and obedience to the ancient gods.
Oh,
more on that in a second.
How very Joseph Smith of him.
Oh, it's more like another character you'll see soon enough.
Okay.
But Utnapishtim is unimpressed with Gilgamesh's plea for immortality, and he challenges him with this weird test to defy sleep to see if he's worthy of his request for immortality.
Okay.
So he's like, if you can stay awake for X amount of time, I'll make you immortal. And Gilgamesh is like, I'm a hard ass, so I can totally do it. So, of course, Utnapishtim spells him into an immediate and deep sleep. And then I remember reading this in college. I'm like, wow, this is such a weird technique. And then employs one of storytelling's most inventive devices to show the passage of time.
Okay.
So he instructs his wife, who doesn't have a name, so we can already see how critical this story was to the Bible.
Right.
Grafting off of it. So he instructs his wife to bake a loaf of bread for every day Gilgamesh is asleep.
Okay.
So after 7 days, he wakes him up, and Gilgamesh jerks awake and thinks he's just dozed off for half a second. But then Utnapishtim shows him the 7 loaves of bread in incrementally increasing states of decay.
Psych! Yeah. Check that.
Mold, motherfucker.
Check and mate, bitch.
So, Gilgamesh fails the test. So as a consolation, Utnapishtim tells him about an undersea flower that restores youth, cleverly named this is all hyphenated, the How the Old Man Once Again Becomes the Young Man plant. Isn't that awesome?
I love that. Wait, can I circle back on one thing real quick?
Yeah.
The test was stay awake.
He had to stay awake for a given amount of time.
But
then he tricked him and put him to sleep.
He just cast a spell on him.
He was never going to give him immortality.
That is a shitty thing to do.
But it's like so much of mythology, right?
Right.
You're given a test that there's no way you can pass.
It's like, okay, your test is don't get hit by this baseball bat.
And I think it's just a constant expression of the gods don't give a fuck. They'll do whatever they want. And you're immortal and you just have to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
So
at least it wasn't one of those tests where he passes and then the guy says, nope, never mind anyway.
So anyway, Gilgamesh goes under the ocean. He gets the flower, but he's going to eat it, but he foolishly stops to rest in a spring and the flower gets stolen by a snake. So like we were saying, classic of the form, his vanity and arrogance that he should get eternal life is rewarded with failure and disappointment. So, so far, so good.
Yeah.
But this
also so dumb because this is not how the old snake stays and becomes a new young snake again plant. It is old man becomes a young man again plant.
Snakes are just greedy.
Snakes are dumb.
Snakes are super greedy.
Go find your own plant.
If they were smart, they'd have arms. So, this isn't a segment about the demigod Gilgamesh. Weirdly, he's 1/3 god, so I'm not sure how that division works, but whatever.
Well, do your ancestry.com. You'll figure it out.
But rather, it's a segment about the once man, now fully god, Utnapishtim.
Mm-hmm.
So recall I said he did something heroic and was rewarded with godhood and obviously eternal life.
Yeah.
This is about what he did to deserve such rewards.
And this is good because I think we can all do this if you want to.
Well,
I'm going to attempt it. After you tell me what it is, I'm going to patrons of the show will get to see me attempt what we're about to learn.
This is a huge Patreon goal. So, Utnapishtim was a very pious nobleman of some kind.
Sure.
In his human life, living along the banks of the Euphrates River.
So far, complete parallel life to my own.
Enki, the Sumerian god of water, appears to him and tells him that the gods are mad and will summon forth a great flood.
Okay.
Utnapishtim is given 7 days to build a great ark into which he will collect his family, the seed of man, the seed of animals, etc., to survive this annihilation.
Sure.
You see, Uncle Dan, dear listeners,
So far, it doesn't sound familiar to me at all.
whether you know it or not, we've all met Utnapishtim before.
Yeah.
We just happen to know him as Noah.
Right. Ken Ham loves this guy.
Like Noah, Utnapishtim is a faithful man who is warned by the gods to build a floating vault to preserve humanity and zoological life. Like Noah, he builds it exactly to the god's specification. Enki even draws it on the ground for him.
That's nice.
Like Noah, he warns the townsfolk of the coming calamity. Like Noah, he sends out a dove to find land. Like Noah, he emerges from the ark and makes a sacrifice to the gods, and his children become the seed corn of all humanity.
Point of order.
Yeah.
You keep saying the phrase, like Noah. I think what you mean is Noah, like Utnapishtim, did all of these things.
I think you're smelling a theme here, Dan. So, of course, as millions of desperate and truthfully sad Christian apologetic websites are now screaming for me to point out, there are some differences too.
Sure.
See, Utnapishtim's ark was this is what I'm anxious to see you do. Utnapishtim's ark was a 200 by 200 by 200 foot cube.
It was the Borg.
It was a fucking Borg ship, not a barn on top of a giant wooden barge, as we all know Noah's ark literally was.
Right.
Utnapishtim was only adrift for 12 days. Not
40.
Not nearly the perilous 40 days and nights, and that drives me crazy, as if that's not just fucking assumed.
Right.
As, the thing that separates the days into countable units.
That was padding for space.
40 days and nights. Well, no shit.
Yeah.
They stopped flooding every night and they went back home to bed.
They had a word count that they needed to meet.
So super different.
Yeah.
Utnapishtim was generous and invited all who wanted to come on the ark, and many local people took him up.
Oh.
Therefore, in addition to saving species, he was preserving skill and knowledge as well, because the blacksmith came, the carpenter came,
Who are the people in your neighborhood?
So where Noah was an utter asshole and didn't let any of the desperate people, including children, on board.
Yeah.
So Noah clearly is better. Also, Utnapishtim's dove could not find land, so he sent out a raven, which did, whereas in order to seem original, the Noah story edited out the raven. I mean, Noah's super original dove found land. So
No, Noah sent out a dove originally that didn't find land, and then he did it again, but it was just another dove.
Right.
So basically all he did was the same story, but replaced raven, second bird.
Right. With a blackbird.
With another dove.
Right. So not even the same narrative universe as the Utnapishtim.
Totally different.
It's like Marvel and DC.
Like, how could you even compare them?
Come on. So
ridiculous.
So most importantly, the fucking clay tablets that the Epic of Gilgamesh are on are hard evidence that Utnapishtim's legend predates the original texts of the Book of Genesis by a minimum of 1,000 years by the most generous scholarship.
Okay.
More recent scholarship on the origins of the first books of the Bible say it's actually probably closer to 1,500 years older than the first books of Genesis.
Huh.
So, and
because they're liars.
And the story of Utnapishtim isn't the only story of a great flood in the biblical zone to predate the biblical version by many hundreds of years.
Right.
Ziusudra is another Sumerian Babylonian hero who would build a ship to survive a world-ending flood. So, sorry guys, not super original, but here's where...
But a fun one nonetheless. I mean, who doesn't have fun with this?
And it gets really fun because Utnapishtim, again, forgotten for thousands of years, is a real troublemaker. And this is where I think our listeners are really going to give him a second look. Because,
I can just see the excitement bubbling in you.
It's worth doing a little anthropological digging here to illustrate how shocking Utnapishtim's story has been to the literalist Christian heart. Recall that in the broad Protestant world, the concept of sola scripta was a critical concept, meaning that truth comes from the Bible, not the church. That was where they separated themselves from the Catholics.
Right.
And that every word of the Bible was absolutely 100% literally fucking true.
Right. Because they didn't know how to read back then.
And it was one of 4 books, right? So if we harken back a second, the 19th century was an incredibly bad one for Christians, when in reality, it should have been a golden age.
Yeah.
They were as happy as clams in a record-breaking high tide, oppressing women, owning other human beings, invading dusky nations, killing half their people, and stealing all their shit, just as their inerrant Bible very much approved of them doing.
Yeah. They were riding high, baby.
It should have been good times, but dang it, the irrepressible curiosity of the human mind, something our good Christian forefathers had spent centuries very much trying to repress, had reached peak irrepressible by the early decades of the 19th century. This witchcraft called science could not just be burned or beaten down fast enough, and it started to make life very complicated for biblical literalists, who at the time was everybody.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It grows on you like a rash. That desire for actual knowledge that can be
a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Can be verified and stuff.
Since its early codification, and long before the 16th century Council of Trent, almost every Christian believed the Bible was not only true in a spiritual sense, but was 100% true in every other sense, historically, scientifically, etc.
Yeah.
Most believed it appeared intact as an original, the Old Testament, and then a sequel, the New Testament. Literally, people are like, oh, this was delivered on this date, this was delivered on this date, as is, put together, boom, truth.
They grew out of the ground in a plant called the Bible plant.
And they thought that it was not only totally infallible, but the oldest story ever, since it obviously starts with the invention of people.
Right.
So,
well, with the invention of light and dark, for God's sake.
And the firmament.
Yeah.
And the vault of the stars.
It predates writing.
That was
this writing.
Probably the most amazing week in history.
Yeah.
Those
really strong week.
Yeah, everything's slowed down since then. So, the emerging fields of geology and paleontology were starting to lay waste to the absurd calculations of the Irish Archbishop James Ussher, who had concluded after carefully reading the Old Testament for clues that the Earth was created on October 23rd, 404 BC.
Right.
An early geologist declared he could prove the Earth was 42,000 years old, setting off a firestorm of controversy.
Right.
In 1859, Darwin published...
Which, by the way, he was wrong about that number. He could prove that it was at least that old.
He was a little off.
He was just a little bit off, but in the wrong direction for the Biblists.
Warmer.
Yeah.
He was warmer. So in 1859, Darwin published The Origin of the Species, and while that did not immediately carpet bomb the Christian world with the full force of what we now understand is the factual theory of evolution by natural selection,
right,
it was scandalous because it proposed something other than God's capricious will in the natural world.
Right.
Then, as most people will know, Champollion finally cracked the Egyptian hieroglyphic code via the Rosetta Stone in 1824. And a couple decades...
You mean them pictures weren't just pictures?
No, they were. There's more than just pretty pictures.
That's weird.
In the cartouches was actual meaning, and then a couple decades after that, for our purposes, the even more critically important deciphering of Sumerian cuneiform occurred. Mm-hmm. And the belief that the Bible was the oldest story on the earth and a historically accurate one was basically fucked.
Just got decimated, yeah.
So in 1872, the discoverer and translator of the tablets that would become known as the Epic of Gilgamesh, a British guy named George Smith, gave a lecture at the Society of Biblical Archaeology. And it was a big deal. All the leading lights of English science and society were in attendance. And he read for them Tablet 11 of the Epic, the story of Utnapishtim.
Uh-huh.
In the sensation and scandal...
The story of Oopsie-daisy.
A holy schmitchnim. In the sensation and scandal that followed, this once dead god rose from the waves to create a terrible stir. Not only was this epic and relatable story 1,000 years older, at least, than Genesis, it was in every important way, as we talked about, the same fucking story as Noah's Ark.
Right.
Except, let's get real, Utnapishtim's son doesn't see him naked, and bam, black people.
Right, exactly.
So Gilgamesh seems to offer no theorizing about the origin and ranking by goodness of the races at all, obviously making it deficient relative to the Bible. So what we now recognize as the muscle-pulling, brain-bending, absurdly gymnastic Christian apologetics of, it's not meant to be taken literally.
Right.
Or, it's metaphor, man. How can you not understand that? Or, of course, in looking for logic, bro, you're missing the poetry, which is what the whole thing is about, bro. Yeah,
it's just literature, man. You got to see it from a literature point of view.
All that shit is post-Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
It is panic-driven, pressure valves and workarounds from people who in pre-Gilgamesh times would have sworn every word of the Bible was literal truth if you put a gun to their heads.
Right.
In all the Bible stories I've researched, Dan, I think you'd probably agree with this, none of the myriad apologetics are as pathetic and laughably terrible as the ones surrounding Noah's stupid floating zoo.
Right.
And they're sadder still when they try to apologize away or explain away Utnapishtim and his giant cubical ark. Pardon me. So
his box of animals.
So they're stuck up a flood without a rational paddle to defend this giant wet mess. So let's all give a tip of the hat to Utnapishtim, both before we put him back under the water, who was Noah 1,500 years before Noah was cool, and without whom our Christian friends would have a much easier time defending their basically incoherent, indefensible shambles of what was until pretty recently a 100% literally true book.
Well, and is still to many. Let's not forget there are many people in this modern era, in this country of ours, who believe 100% that the Bible is literally true.
Yeah. And that Noah's Ark literally happened.
Yeah. There's an entire goofball giant museum in Kentucky testifying to that very notion.
Yeah, and I would say, if whatever crazy billionaire is done giving his money to the Gamcast boys to make their Christian movie parodies,
right?
If you got some money left over,
give it to us.
Give it to us. We'll buy the plot of land next to Ken Ham's Ark
and make an Utnapishtim
and we'll
box.
build our fucking 20-story monstrous Borg cube black tar covered ark and laugh at the quivering little plagiarized myth beneath our shadow.
Yes, I like it.
Yeah, so hook us up. Hook us up.
We have good ideas on this show.
Yep. So
we're doing it.
Hats off to you, Utnapishtim. Now back under the waves you go.
Goodbye.
Bye.